Picture this. A Roman legion stands at the edge of a battlefield facing an enemy twice their size. The opposing warriors brandish massive swords, tower behind enormous shields, and hurl primitive spears with wild abandon. By every measure, the Romans should be crushed. Yet within hours, their enemies lie defeated, their formations shattered, their weapons useless. How did this happen? For centuries, historians have credited Roman dominance to discipline and sheer numbers. But that's only half the truth. The real secret of Roman conquest wasn't just the men who wielded the weapons. It was the weapons themselves. Rome didn't just train better soldiers. They armed them with tools so ingenious, so perfectly designed for warfare, that they rewrote the very rules of combat. Today, you're about to discover 8 Roman weapons so clever, so revolutionary, that they didn't just win battles. They shaped military history for the next 2,000 years. From a sword designed to kill with surgical precision to siege engines that could level mountains, these weren't just weapons of war. They were instruments of empire, each one a masterpiece of engineering that turned ordinary men into an unstoppable force of conquest.
The contrast is clear.
Prepare to see Roman warfare through entirely new eyes. Because what you're about to learn will forever change how you think about the greatest military machine in human history. When most people imagine a sword, they picture a long, elegant blade, something fit for dueling or ceremony. The Roman Gladius was neither elegant nor long. At just 18 to 24 inches, it looked almost comically small, compared to the massive swords wielded by Celtic and Germanic warriors. Yet this humble weapon became the instrument that carved out the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. The genius of the Gladius wasn't in its size, it was in its purpose. While barbarian warriors swung their enormous swords in wide, theatrical arcs, trying to slash and hack their enemies, the Gladius was designed for one thing: the killing thrust. Its short, leaf-shaped blade was perfectly balanced for stabbing, not slashing. The point was razor-sharp, capable of punching through armor, ribs, and vital organs with devastating efficiency. This design wasn't accidental. Roman tactical doctrine was built around the testudo formation and close-quarters combat. In the crush of battle, where soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, there was no room for sweeping sword strokes. A Celtic longsword might be impressive in single combat, but in formation fighting it became a liability. The Gladius, however, was lethal in tight spaces. A Roman legionnaire could drive his Gladius upward into an enemy's torso with a quick, economical motion, penetrating beneath the ribcage to puncture the heart or lungs. The wound channel was narrow but deep, causing massive internal trauma while being difficult to treat on the battlefield. Ancient medical texts describe these Gladius wounds as almost invariably fatal. But the Gladius was more than just a killing tool. It was a symbol of Roman military philosophy. Where other cultures celebrated the individual warrior's strength and skill, Rome perfected the art of collective killing. The Gladius turned each legionnaire into a component of a larger machine, a human weapon optimized for the systematic destruction of enemy forces. The psychological impact was enormous. Enemies who had never faced Roman tactics expected the familiar dance of sword-on-sword combat. Instead, they found themselves impaled by short, deadly thrusts delivered with mechanical precision. The Gladius didn't just kill bodies, it shattered the enemy's understanding of how warfare worked. This weapon of conquest would influence sword design for centuries, its principles echoing in medieval daggers and modern bayonets. But in its time, the Gladius was revolution itself, proof that in warfare, intelligence trumps brute force every time. Imagine charging into battle behind your shield, confident in its protection, only to have that shield become a death trap in your hands. This nightmare scenario was exactly what Roman engineers designed when they created the Pilum, a javelin so diabolically clever that it transformed the fundamental nature of ancient warfare. At first glance, the Pilum looked like any other throwing spear, a wooden shaft topped with an iron point. But that iron section held a secret that would terrorize Rome's enemies for centuries. The upper portion of the iron shank was made from soft, untempered metal, deliberately designed to bend upon impact. Here's how this ingenious weapon changed everything. When a Roman legionnaire hurled his pilum at an enemy shield, the hardened tip would punch through the wood and bronze facing. But then, as the spear's momentum carried it forward, the soft iron shank would bend under the shield's weight, creating an L-shaped hook that made the weapon impossible to remove quickly. Suddenly, an enemy warrior found himself carrying a 6-foot spear permanently attached to his shield. The shield became useless for defense, too unwieldy to maneuver, too heavy to hold up. Warriors had two terrible choices: drop their primary protection and face Roman swords defenseless, or waste precious seconds trying to hack the Pilum free while Roman infantry closed for the kill. But the genius didn't stop there. Because the iron shank bent on impact, enemies couldn't pull out the Pilum and throw it back at Roman lines. This seemingly simple design feature solved one of the oldest problems in ancient warfare: how to use projectile weapons without arming your enemy. Roman tactical manuals show how this weapon integrated into their battle doctrine. Just before a Roman charge, the front ranks would hurl their pila in a devastating volley. In seconds, hundreds of enemy shields became useless anchors. The psychological effect was devastating. Warriors who had spent years training behind their shields suddenly found themselves naked before Roman steel. Archaeological evidence from battlefields across Europe shows pila with their characteristic bent shanks, mute testimony to the weapon's effectiveness. Germanic and Celtic smiths tried desperately to copy the design, but they never mastered the precise metallurgy required, the art of making iron that was hard enough to penetrate armor, but soft enough to bend on command. The Pilum represents Roman engineering at its most ruthless, a weapon that didn't just wound enemies but systematically dismantled their ability to fight back. It turned every enemy shield into a liability, and every thrown spear into a one-way ticket to defeat. In the hands of disciplined legionnaires, the Pilum didn't just win battles, it made them inevitable. Most ancient warriors saw their shields as purely defensive tools, something to hide behind when arrows flew and swords swung. Roman legionnaires knew better. In their hands, the massive Scutum wasn't just protection, it was a weapon of conquest that could crush enemies and reshape the battlefield itself. The Scutum was a monster of ancient military engineering, 4 feet tall, 2.5 feet wide, and curved like a section of a giant cylinder. Made from 3 layers of wooden planks glued in alternating grain patterns covered in canvas and leather, and rimmed with iron, it weighed about 22 pounds, more than many swords. To untrained eyes, it looked like overkill. To Roman tactical minds, it was perfection. The curved design was revolutionary. While flat shields could be penetrated by determined thrusts, the Scutum's cylindrical curve deflected blows at angles, dissipating force that would otherwise transfer to the bearer. Arrows that struck the shield glanced off harmlessly. Sword strikes that should have split wood instead slid away into empty air. But the Scutum's true genius emerged when Roman soldiers locked them together in the famous testudo, the tortoise formation. Suddenly, individual shields became components of a mobile fortress. Front rank shields created an impenetrable wall, side shields protected the flanks. Rear rank soldiers held their scudo overhead, forming a roof that could deflect arrows, rocks, and even burning oil. Inside this armored shell, legionnaires could advance across any battlefield. Immune to projectiles that would slaughter unprotected infantry, they could march right up to enemy walls under a rain of arrows, their shields turning death from above into a mere inconvenience. Siege warfare would never be the same, yet the Scutum's offensive capabilities were equally devastating. The iron boss at the shield's center wasn't decorative, it was a weapon. A trained legionnaire could drive that metal knob into an enemy's face with bone-crushing force, stunning or killing instantly. The shield's weight made it perfect for shield bashing, knocking enemies off balance and creating openings for the Gladius. Roman battle tactics integrated these offensive techniques seamlessly. A legionnaire would slam his Scutum into an enemy, driving them backward, then thrust with his Gladius in the split second of confusion. The shield cleared the path. The sword finished the job. Archaeological finds show Scuta decorated with bronze and silver, indicating their importance to Roman identity. These weren't just tools of war. They were symbols of Roman engineering superiority. When barbarian weapons shattered against Scutum walls, they weren't just losing battles. They were witnessing the triumph of Roman intellect over brute force. The Scutum's influence echoes through military history. Medieval heater shields, riot police shields, even modern ballistic protection, all trace their lineage back to Roman innovation. But in its time, the Scutum was more than revolutionary. It was Rome's mobile wall advancing steadily across the world, carrying civilization on its iron-rimmed edge. For thousands of years, a high wall meant safety. Cities perched on hills surrounded by massive stone fortifications could laugh at approaching armies. Siege warfare was a game of patience. Attackers starved defenders, defenders outlasted attackers, and walls stood eternal. Then Roman engineers arrived with their siege engines, and suddenly no wall was high enough. No fortress strong enough to guarantee survival. The ballista was Rome's answer to the crossbow, if crossbows were built by giants. Standing 8 feet tall with arms spanning 12 feet, this torsion-powered artillery piece could hurl iron bolts with surgical precision. But calling it a giant crossbow misses the point entirely. The ballista was a sniper rifle in an age of swords, capable of picking off individual defenders from distances that made retaliation impossible. Roman siege engineers would position ballistae 400 yards from enemy walls, close enough for devastating accuracy, far enough to avoid return fire. The iron bolts, weighing up to a pound and tipped with pyramid-shaped heads, could punch through armor, shields, and bodies with equal ease. Defenders who showed themselves on the walls did so at their peril. One shot from a ballista could kill 3 men in a line, but the ballista was precision work. For pure destructive power, Romans turned to the onager, named after the wild ass for its tremendous kick. This catapult-like engine hurled stones weighing up to 60 pounds in high arcs that came crashing down with the force of meteors. Where the ballista killed men, the onager killed walls. The engineering was brutally efficient. A twisted rope made from animal sinew provided the power. The same torsion principles that powered crossbows, scaled up to titanic proportions. When released, the throwing arm would snap forward with such violence that the entire engine would leap off the ground, hence the name Wild Ass. The psychological impact was devastating. Imagine cowering behind walls that had protected your city for generations, only to watch massive stones arc through the sky and smash everything you trusted into rubble. The onager didn't just breach walls, it announced that the age of passive defense was over. For battlefield work, Romans deployed the scorpio, a smaller, more mobile version of the ballista. These could be quickly assembled and positioned to support infantry attacks. Imagine charging Roman lines only to find yourself under fire from multiple directions. Iron bolts punching through shields and armor while Gladius-wielding legionnaires closed for the kill. Roman siege tactics integrated all 3 engines into coordinated bombardments. Ballistae would clear defenders from the walls with precision fire. Onagers would pound breach points until the masonry cracked and fell. Scorpios would provide covering fire for assault troops. This wasn't just siege warfare, it was industrial-scale destruction. The engine's mobility gave Romans unprecedented strategic flexibility. Unlike the massive siege towers of earlier eras, Roman artillery could be disassembled, transported, and rebuilt at new locations. No city was beyond reach. No fortress could count on geographical protection. These weapons transformed the ancient world's power balance. Cities that had stood unconquered for centuries fell within days of Roman engines arriving. The siege engines didn't just win battles, they made resistance seem futile. When your walls meant nothing and your height advantage disappeared under a rain of stones and bolts, what choice remained but surrender? Rome was born on land, built by soldiers who trusted dirt beneath their feet and formation, fighting above all else. When they looked out at the Mediterranean Sea, they saw not opportunity but obstacle, a vast blue barrier controlled by Carthage's superior navy. According to every military expert of the age, Rome's landlubber legions were doomed the moment they faced Carthaginian warships. Then Roman engineers invented the Corvus, and naval warfare was never the same. The Corvus, Latin for raven, looked deceptively simple, a 36-foot boarding bridge mounted on a pivot at the bow of Roman warships. But this humble device contained engineering genius that would reshape the balance of Mediterranean power. The bridge could swing in a 180-degree arc and featured a massive iron spike at its far end, designed to punch into enemy deck planking and lock the ships together. Here's how it changed everything. Traditional naval battles were contests of seamanship. Experienced Carthaginian crews would ram Roman ships, rake them with missiles, or outmaneuver them with superior sailing skills. Romans raised on farms and marching grounds were hopeless at sea until they made the sea irrelevant. When a Roman ship closed with an enemy vessel, the Corvus would swing out and crash down onto the enemy deck. The iron spike, the raven's beak, would bite deep into the planking, creating an unbreakable connection. Suddenly, the naval battle became a land battle, fought on a bridge 30 feet above the waves. Now Roman advantages took over. Disciplined legionnaires in full armor would charge across the bridge, shields locked, gladius ready. Carthaginian sailors trained for naval combat found themselves fighting Rome's finest infantry in close quarters combat. The outcome was inevitable. The first major test came at the Battle of Mylae in 260 BCE. Carthaginian Admiral Hannibal Gisco commanded 130 ships against the Roman fleet of Consul Gaius Duilius. The Carthaginians expected easy victory. Romans were notorious landlubbers, clumsy at sea and helpless in naval combat. Instead, they sailed into a trap. Roman ships advanced in line, Corvus bridges ready. As Carthaginian vessels closed for ramming attacks, the bridges swung out and locked onto their decks. In minutes, the sea battle became dozens of simultaneous land battles. Roman marines swarmed across the bridges, overwhelming Carthaginian crews with precisely the tactics that had conquered Italy. The results were stunning. 50 Carthaginian ships captured or sunk, including the flagship. Rome's hopeless navy had crushed the Mediterranean's greatest naval power in their first major engagement. The Corvus had turned Rome's weakness into strength, their inexperience into irrelevance. But the Corvus was more than a tactical innovation. It was a strategic revolution. By making naval battles resemble land battles, it allowed Rome to project their military strength across water barriers that had previously been impassable. Islands became reachable, coastal cities vulnerable, overseas territories conquerable. The device had limitations. It made ships top-heavy and vulnerable to storms. Many Corvus-equipped vessels were lost to weather rather than enemy action. But the strategic impact was undeniable. Within decades, Rome controlled the Western Mediterranean, their merchant ships carrying goods that once belonged exclusively to Carthaginian traders. The Corvus proved that Roman engineering could overcome any obstacle. When the sea blocked their path, they built a bridge. When enemies held naval advantages, Romans changed the rules of naval combat itself. The Raven's Beak didn't just win battles. It announced that Rome would not be stopped by water, weather, or foreign expertise. Before gunpowder changed warfare forever, ancient armies struggled with a fundamental problem: how to break up enemy formations before hand-to-hand combat began. Archers were effective but required years of training and expensive equipment. Slingers were deadly but had limited range and accuracy. Roman engineers solved this problem with characteristic elegance. They created the Plumbatae, a weapon so simple a child could use it, yet so effective it could shatter charging cavalry. The Plumbatae looked almost innocuous, a dart about a foot long, fletched with feathers like an arrow, but weighted with a lead ball behind the iron point. This simple addition transformed a throwing dart into a precision weapon that could outrange slings and require minimal training to master. But the true genius lay in how Romans integrated these weapons into their tactical doctrine. Each legionnaire carried 5 Plumbatae attached to the inside of his Scutum shield. This meant a full-strength legion could unleash 25,000 lead-weighted darts in a single volley, a metal storm that would devastate any approaching enemy formation. The lead weight gave each dart tremendous kinetic energy, allowing it to punch through armor that might deflect ordinary arrows. The tactical applications were revolutionary. As enemy cavalry thundered toward Roman lines, legionnaires would step forward and hurl their Plumbatae in coordinated volleys. Horses, struck by lead-weighted points traveling at high velocity, would stumble and fall, creating chaos in the charge. Riders who survived the fall found themselves on foot, facing Roman infantry at close quarters, exactly where Romans preferred to fight. Against infantry formations, the effect was equally devastating. Picture a Germanic warband charging Roman positions, warriors working themselves into battle fury, when suddenly the air fills with whistling death. The Plumbatae would punch through shields, pierce chainmail, and cause wounds that dropped men instantly. The psychological impact of watching comrades fall to invisible projectiles was as damaging as the physical casualties. Roman training manuals describe specific techniques for Plumbatae use. Soldiers learned to throw in high arcs for maximum range, or in flat trajectories for armor penetration. They practiced quick-draw techniques, pulling darts from shield attachments and hurling them in fluid motions that took seconds to execute. The weapon's effectiveness appears in contemporary accounts. Vegetius, the Roman military writer, described Plumbatae as more deadly than arrows, and credited them with winning numerous engagements. Archaeological finds across the Roman frontier show Plumbata points embedded in shield bosses, armor plates, and even skeletal remains, grim testimony to their lethality. But perhaps the most brilliant aspect of the Plumbata was its economy. Unlike composite bows that required exotic materials and master craftsmen, or siege engines that demanded engineering expertise, Plumbatae could be mass-produced by ordinary smiths. The iron points were simple to forge, lead was abundant throughout the empire, and wooden shafts could be cut from any forest. This meant Roman armies could carry enormous quantities of these weapons without straining supply lines. A single mule could transport thousands of Plumbatae, providing enough ammunition for extended campaigns. When battles were won, the iron points could be recovered and reused, making the weapons economically sustainable. The Plumbata represents Roman military thinking at its most practical. Take a simple concept, refine it through systematic testing, then deploy it on a scale that overwhelms enemy countermeasures. These humble darts didn't just win battles, they demonstrated that in warfare, quantity has a quality all its own. Most ancient armies saw tools and weapons as separate categories: axes for chopping wood, picks for digging, swords for killing. Roman engineers looked at this division and saw inefficiency. Their solution was the dolabra, a combination tool weapon that embodied Roman military philosophy. Every piece of equipment must serve multiple purposes, and every soldier must be ready for any task the empire demanded. The dolabra married an axe blade to a pickaxe point on a single handle, creating what modern soldiers would recognize as the ancestor of the entrenching tool. But this humble description misses the revolutionary impact this device had on Roman military capabilities. With a dolabra in his hands, every legionnaire became a carpenter, miner, fortification engineer, and emergency warrior. The engineering challenges were significant. The tool needed to be light enough for soldiers to carry on long marches, yet sturdy enough for heavy construction work. The axe blade had to hold an edge for cutting timber, while the pick point required hardening for breaking stone and hard earth. Roman smiths solved these problems by using different grades of steel for each component, forge welding them into a unified tool that could handle any task. In Roman hands, the dolabra became an instrument of rapid fortification. Ancient armies typically took days to build defensive positions, giving enemies time to organize attacks or call for reinforcements. Roman legions, equipped with dolabrae, could construct a fortified camp in hours. The axe blades felled trees for palisades. The pick points dug ditches and ramparts, and by nightfall, a Roman force would be protected behind walls that medieval armies would envy. This capability transformed Roman strategic thinking. Other armies had to plan campaigns around existing fortifications, limiting their mobility and forcing them to fight on enemy terms. Romans carried their fortifications with them. Every knight's camp became a fortress, every river crossing a bridgehead, every hilltop a fortified position. The dolabra didn't just build defenses, it created strategic flexibility that no enemy could match. But the tool's combat applications were equally impressive. The axe blade could cleave through shields and armor with devastating force, while the pick point could punch through the heaviest bronze plates. In siege warfare, legionnaires used dolabrae to hack through enemy palisades, undermine walls, and breach fortifications that had stood for generations. Roman siege accounts describe dolabra-wielding soldiers working in shifts to demolish enemy defenses. While some men fought on the walls, others chopped and dug with systematic efficiency, reducing mighty fortresses to rubble through organized labor. The tool made every legionnaire a siege engineer, capable of dismantling any obstacle in the empire's path. The dolabra's psychological impact on enemies cannot be overstated. Barbarian warriors expected Romans to fight with conventional weapons, swords, spears, shields. Instead, they faced soldiers who could hack through their defenses with tools that looked like common implements, but cut like weapons of war. The message was clear. Romans weren't just better warriors. They were better at everything. Archaeological evidence shows dolabrae at Roman sites across 3 continents. From Hadrian's Wall in Britain to the Danube frontier in Romania, these tools built the infrastructure that held the empire together. Roads, bridges, fortifications, aqueducts, all bore the marks of dolabra construction. The tool's influence extended far beyond military applications. Roman colonists used dolobri to clear forests, build cities, and create the agricultural infrastructure that fed the empire. What began as a soldier's tool became an instrument of civilization, spreading Roman methods across the known world. In the hands of disciplined legionnaires, the dolabra represented everything that made Rome unstoppable: practicality, efficiency, and the ability to adapt any tool to serve the empire's needs. It wasn't just an axe or a pick. It was empire building in tangible form. When we think of Roman weapons, we picture gladius shields, ballistae, and siege towers. But Rome's deadliest weapon wasn't made of iron or bronze. It was made of stone, timber, and engineering genius. Roman military engineering didn't just support their armies. It was their army's greatest force multiplier, turning logistical advantages into tactical dominance and temporary victories into permanent conquest. The Roman road system wasn't built for commerce. It was built for war. Every mile of paved stone was a strategic weapon, allowing legions to move at unprecedented speed across vast distances. While enemies struggled through forests and swamps, Romans marched on highways that carried them from battlefield to battlefield with mechanical precision. Consider the numbers. Roman roads allowed armies to maintain 20 miles per day indefinitely, twice the speed of forces traveling cross-country. This meant Roman reinforcements could arrive weeks ahead of schedule. Roman supplies could reach fronts that should have been cut off, and Roman commanders could coordinate operations across distances that should have made communication impossible. But roads were just the beginning. Every night, Roman armies built fortified camps that medieval engineers would have admired. Using standardized designs perfected over centuries, legionnaires could transform any piece of ground into a fortress within hours. The camp wasn't just protection, it was a psychological weapon that announced Roman permanence to any watching enemies. These overnight fortifications followed precise geometric patterns: rectangular enclosures with rounded corners, gates positioned for optimal defense, streets laid out in grid patterns that allowed rapid troop movement. Archaeological excavations across Europe reveal thousands of these camps, their earthwork still visible after 2 millennia, testament to Roman engineering precision. The engineering extended to siege warfare, where Romans didn't just attack fortifications, they built competing cities. The siege of Alesia saw Julius Caesar's engineers construct 2 complete lines of fortification, one to contain the Gallic defenders, another to protect Roman forces from relief armies. In months, Romans built more defensive works than most cities managed in decades. Roman bridge-building capabilities were legendary. Engineers could span rivers that had stopped armies for centuries, using techniques that wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. The bridge over the Rhine, built in 10 days to demonstrate Roman power to Germanic tribes, wasn't just a river crossing. It was a statement that no natural barrier could contain Roman ambition. Water management gave Romans another overwhelming advantage. Their engineers could supply armies in deserts where enemies died of thirst, using aqueduct technology to bring fresh water across impossible distances. They could also weaponize water, flooding enemy positions or diverting rivers to leave enemy cities high and dry. Roman portable equipment was equally revolutionary. Standardized tools, prefabricated components, and modular construction techniques allowed armies to carry entire cities in their baggage trains. Workshops, granaries, hospitals, armories, all could be assembled wherever Romans chose to campaign. The engineering corps wasn't separate from combat forces. It was integrated into every legion. Soldiers who built roads by day fought battles by night, using the same disciplined organization for both construction and combat. This dual capability meant Roman armies never had to choose between fighting and building. They did both simultaneously. Perhaps most importantly, Roman engineering created permanence. Other ancient armies won battles and moved on, leaving conquered territories to revert to their previous owners. Romans won battles and then built the infrastructure to hold their conquests forever. Roads connected new territories to the empire's heart. Aqueducts sustained Roman cities and foreign lands. And fortifications created permanent bases for future operations. The psychological impact was devastating. Enemies who defeated Roman armies in battle often found new legions arriving on roads the Romans had built, supplied by Roman infrastructure. supported by Roman engineering.
The Roman Gladius.
It became clear that fighting Rome meant fighting not just an army, but an entire civilization dedicated to systematic conquest. Roman military engineering turned warfare from a temporary activity into a permanent transformation of conquered landscapes. It wasn't enough to defeat Roman armies. Enemies had to defeat Roman civilization itself, a task that proved beyond the capabilities of any ancient power. From the precise thrusts of the Gladius to the mechanical precision of siege engines, from the bent iron of the Pilum to the stone foundations of military roads, we've traced the technological revolution that built the greatest empire in human history. These 8 innovations, sword, spear, shield, artillery, naval bridge, throwing dart, entrenching tool, and engineering itself, represent more than mere weapons. They represent the systematic application of human intelligence to the problems of warfare. Each innovation solved a specific military challenge through elegant engineering. The Gladius transformed individual combat from slashing duels to efficient killing. The Pilum disabled enemy shields while remaining unusable by enemies. The Scutum provided both defense and offense in a single package. Siege engines made fortifications obsolete. The Corvus turned naval battles into land battles. Plumbatae gave every soldier artillery capability. The Delabra made every legionnaire a combat engineer. And military engineering turned temporary victories into permanent conquests. But these weapons succeeded because they were part of a larger system, a civilization that valued practical innovation over traditional methods, that tested ideas through systematic experimentation, and that scaled successful innovations across 3 continents. Roman weapons worked because Roman society was designed to create, refine, and deploy them with ruthless efficiency. The innovations echo through military history to this day. Modern bayonets trace their lineage to the Gladius. Contemporary riot shields use principles pioneered by the Scutum. Artillery tactics still follow patterns established by Roman siege engineers. Combat engineering units employ techniques refined in Roman camps. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Roman military innovation was its integration. These weren't isolated inventions but components of a unified system. Each weapon complemented the others, creating tactical possibilities that no single innovation could achieve alone. The Gladius worked with the Scutum, the Pilum prepared the way for both, and all 3 were deployed by armies that moved on Roman roads and slept in Roman camps. So here's the final question that should haunt every student of military history. If a Roman legion marched onto a modern battlefield, equipped with these ancient innovations and organized according to their timeless principles, how many of their ideas would still work? How many of their solutions to the eternal problems of warfare would prove as effective today as they were 2,000 years ago? The answer might surprise you and should definitely worry you, because the Romans didn't just build an empire with these weapons. They built a template for conquest that has never been improved upon, only imitated. What other secrets of ancient warfare are we still discovering? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the innovations that shaped human history. The past holds more surprises than you might imagine.